Welcome back to the Speakeasy podcast. Today I'm sitting down with Katie Majors Davis. She is a wife, mom to 15, and she's the founder of Amazima Ministries. You may know her from her best-selling book, Kisses from Katie, which I loved, where she shared her journey from a teenager in Tennessee to a young woman living in Uganda, caring for children, building a ministry that serves thousands. And today I just got to ask her questions and talk about life now, how faith has been refined over the years, and what it means to really live a life fully surrendered to God's call. So whether you followed her story for years or you're hearing her name for the first time, I think you're going to walk away encouraged, challenged, and really reminded of the beauty found in obedience. We're going to take a quick second and talk about this week's sponsor, Angel Studios, and their newest movie, Sketch. Sketch is the perfect movie to wrap up your summer and step into a new season feeling inspired. It has the same magic as the movies that we grew up on, like think Jumanji. It tells a story of a little girl drops her sketchbook into a magical pond, and all of her drawings come to life. And at its heart, Sketch is a reminder that we all carry big feelings and that together, even the scariest moments can transform into something beautiful. Right now, if you join as a premium Angel Guild member, you can get 2 free tickets to see Sketch, which is in theaters now, and full access to Angel's entire streaming library. So if you want more movies that inspire, uplift, and bring people together, head to angel.com/Blake and become a premium Angel Guild member. Grab your Sketch tickets, and it'll be a great movie for you and your family. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I am so excited to have you here. I was telling you before we started recording that I read Kisses for Katie when it came out years ago. I've followed your story. I mean, I think anybody that came in contact with it was just drawn in because it's such an incredible and beautiful and inspiring story, and also just wild. Your story is so wild.
It is wild. It's wild even to me.
It's gotta be. I mean, I think about, we were talking before, my, just little normal life in Southern Louisiana. And there are days where I'm like, this is crazy. And then you talk to somebody like you and it's like, oh, all right. So let's dive in by telling a little bit for the people who are new to your story. You're 18 years old. Am I correct that you were homecoming queen?
Yeah.
You are just very, you're just a very normal, all-American girl. You get on a plane, you go on a mission trip to Uganda, and your whole life changes.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's right. I grew up outside of Nashville in the United States in a pretty affluent community, did kind of the normal high school thing. And then my senior year of high school, I went on a short-term trip to Uganda for 3 weeks, and it just kind of completely rocked my world. And while I was there, there was a Ugandan pastor and his wife, and he said to me, he said, I think the Lord is going to bring you back here. And when he does, I just want you to know that you always have a place with me and my wife. And so,
Mm.
I was 18. I was kind of like,
Okay.
okay. Came back here, finished high school, and really couldn't get Uganda out of my mind. And so by the time I graduated from high school, I had committed to take a gap year between high school and college and go out and work at the orphanage that this pastor and his wife were running in a really rural community of Uganda. So I moved over to Uganda after my senior year of high school on, again, what I thought was going to be just a gap year trip, and was serving in this orphanage. Of course, completely fell in love with the kids and the community. But as I got to know the kids at the orphanage, there were about 120 of them, anywhere from the age of 2 to 18. And as I got to know these children, they would talk about their families. They would talk about their moms and their dads, their grandparents, their aunts and their uncles. They would even sometimes go and visit them in the community. And so that was shocking to me. As an American with very little exposure to missions or overseas work, I had just assumed that these children had lost their parents or something terrible had happened to them to land them in this orphanage. And as I just began asking more and more questions, as it turns out in that community, the children were coming to the orphanage not because they had lost their parents, but just because of poverty. School is not free in Uganda. And so parents were sending their kids into institutional care so that they would have access to an American sponsor who could pay for their
Mm.
education. And this is an old statistic, but several years ago, the statistic was that 85% of children in institutional care in East Africa actually have at least one living parent. And so what we see is this kind of huge problem of what we would call poverty orphans,
Mm.
where parents are sending their children away not because they don't love them, not because they don't want to raise them, but because they want them to have access to education and what they believe will be a better life. They send them to a place where they have access to education. And so in a community, if an orphanage is the only model of aid and help, that becomes the place where all the kids go to live. And so that didn't sit well with me. I mean,
Hmm.
even at 18 and then 19 years old, I was just like, wait, what? You can't live with your parents because you want to go to school?
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a different solution. And so I actually knew twin girls in the community that I had gotten to know just from going to church there in the community. They were being raised by their grandmother, and their grandmother was just contemplating what she was going to do because they were about to start school and she did not have the money. She was a farmer, like many people in Uganda were. They just ate what they grew in the garden. And
Hmm.
so she didn't have cash to pay for them to go to school. And there were two of them, which a lot of Ugandan families have multiple kids. And she was just torn up about how she was going to get them an education. And I said, oh, I think I can help you with that. So I called my parents back in the States and I was like, okay, here's the deal. If you can send me like $100, we can get these kids in school. We can get them their school supplies, everything that they need. And so my parents, were great and were like, okay, sure, we'll help with that.
Yeah.
And then really they just started telling friends and family members back here in the United States about this need that I was encountering. I was also keeping a blog that kind of, I mean, for lack of a better term, like kind of went viral before
Yep.
viral, what we were calling it, when millions of people read your stuff on the
Yeah.
internet. And so really, just as I told these stories of these children and families that I was encountering in this village that I was living in, people started sending in funds. And so within the first couple months that I was living in Uganda, I was sending like 5 kids to school. And then within the first 6 months, it was 10 kids. And then it was 40 kids. And so it just kind of organically snowballed. I ended up founding a nonprofit because I wanted to be able to like in an organized way, bring in this money and send these kids to school. And so Amazima is the name of the organization that I founded. When it was time to pick a name, I felt like God kept putting John 8:32 on my heart that you shall know the truth and the truth will
Mm.
set you free, and really put it on my heart that I wanted these kids to have access to truth of the world they lived in through education. But even more than that, I really wanted them to know the truth of Jesus and
Hmm.
that he saved them and that he created them wonderfully and perfectly in his image. And so, Amazima is the Luganda word for truth. That's what it means. And so, yeah, just wanting that to be kind of our mission in the community, that you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free, and we can have freedom in Christ together. And so Amazima just kept growing and growing. And, I kind of was like, oh, maybe this is not just a gap year. Maybe this is like
Mm.
my life's work. Like maybe this is what God is doing. I was still so young, but super passionate and just super in awe of kind of what he was starting to build around me. And so, yeah, I had some publishers approach me and ask like, "Hey, can we turn your blog into a book?" And again, that was maybe when I was 20, so I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, cool. Let's do it."
And then it was a bestseller.
And then that book just like exploded and did so well. You write a book and you think like, "Well, my grandma will buy a copy."
Uh-huh.
Like, 90% of books sell only a handful of copies. And so
Yeah.
again, it was just like beyond my wildest dreams that it became a bestseller and it sat on the bestseller list forever. And I mean, obviously, that like then really propelled the ministry of Amazima because funds just started pouring in. And so today, Amazima has around 700 students that we sponsor. We do a lot of what we call community engagement with their families. So really wanting to not just help the children have access to education, but also
Yeah.
help the parents grow in their socioeconomic stability and we've got job trainings and different farming trainings and all kinds of seminars and things that we do for the parents. We do community Bible studies. We've actually built two schools. So we've got two different campuses where our students come to school. And really, the focus of everything that we do in Uganda is discipleship. We want every student, every family that we interact with to have a staff member who is walking with them, knows their names, knows their stories, is like really tied in with their family and is continually pointing them back to Jesus. So it has grown beyond my wildest dreams and just been so incredible. I actually just got back from Uganda. We moved to the United States almost 4 years ago, which is wild. But I still get back and forth to Uganda several times a year, and we have an incredible staff on the ground there that is running the ministry, and so that lets me be here and kind of keep doing stuff like this and talking
Yeah.
about the mission and spreading the word and raising funds for us to continue to do what we're doing over there in Uganda.
That's incredible. I love what you said kind of at the beginning that that pastor kind of prophetically called that out in you, that he
Yes.
was like, "Hey, I think there's a place for you here, and not only like here, but here, like I'll take you
Mhm.
in, like I'll make space for you." Because I know that there's not a lot of abundance or like margin in that place. And so for him to look at you, this little baby, honestly, this little
Yes.
American baby, and be like, "Hey, I see something in you and like I'm here to foster it." That's incredible.
It really was so beautiful. And it was just, I mean, that in itself is such a beautiful picture of what Ugandan culture is like. Just, you're right, there aren't a lot of, there's not a lot of material wealth.
Right.
And yet, I have found Ugandan people to be some of the most generous,
Yep.
the most hospitable. Everybody in that community in those early years was quick to invite me into their home and quick to share their food with me. This pastor and his wife were so quick to share their space with me. Their house was tiny.
Right.
That they didn't care. They wanted to love, they wanted to serve, they wanted to be hospitable, and it really altered my worldview. I mean, like, I didn't grow up in Uganda, but in a lot of ways I did because I
Yeah.
lived there from the time I was 18 till the time I was 35. And so, pretty much, my becoming an adult from being a child really happened in Uganda. And I feel like in so many ways that shaped my worldview, it shaped my culture, it shaped who I am as a person and my own desires for hospitality and generosity. Just to watch a people who, coming in as an American who had grown up in just a more materially abundant
Yeah.
environment, to watch people give so freely and share so freely, not just of their stuff, which was limited, but they would still share,
Hmm.
but also of their time,
And
of their
themselves.
space, of themselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was really different, and really, really, really beautiful to me. And it really did form who I am as a person today.
Yeah. I mean, I think yes, like you weren't a child there, but those years, like 18 to 35, like or 30, that's when you're figuring out who
So
you
formative.
are. It's so formative. I, not at all the same, but served a short-term mission in a really small town in Mexico. And I remember being like feeling like it was hit you like an 18-wheeler every single morning because a family let me just come and stay with them that my church
Wow.
had connection with. And I ended up, so they gave me their 3-year-old daughter's bed, but by the second night, she would just sleep with me, which was
Oh,
the best. But I mean, they're like giving me a bed and they're like, they would, try to make sure that I took more food and took a shower first. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like, like, I'm trying to help. I don't,
yeah.
and I think even just being there for 2 weeks at 19, I think you can't help but walk away from that experience so aware of how different it is in so many other places. And that's not to say that their generosity and all of that doesn't exist in America, because it absolutely does.
Right.
But it's when it's coming from someone that you, in your mind, like you're there to help them, you're there to serve them, and they're serving you in return. I think like service really was rooted in me in that time, that it really doesn't matter what you have as far as like emotional margin, material, physical, whatever it is, that like through Christ there really is always something to give.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's so beautiful.
So you didn't just go down there and start a, incredible ministry, and you became a mother. You adopted some of these children, not just some, a lot of kids in the end. How did it go from, hey mom, like can you send $100 so I can buy school supplies, to actually like stepping into adoption?
Sure. Yeah, well, while, obviously I was doing ministry and becoming really, really deeply connected in this community, I eventually did move out of the pastor's house and rented like my own little tiny place so that I could have a space where the kids that were now enrolled in Amazima could come and we would do Bible studies and we would pass out school supplies and just kind of was running this tiny baby ministry out of this little house in rural Uganda. And during that time was just like becoming really deeply connected with this community. And so there were lots of times where a child, for whatever reason, would have an emergency situation, or maybe something would happen with the parent or guardian that they were living with. And so I became registered as a foster parent so that I could bring these kids into my home. And sometimes that was for a really short amount of time, just a day or two, or a week or two, or a month or two, until whoever their guardian was got back up on their feet. But there were, I mean, of course, there are always like outlier situations. And so there were times where, specifically for 5 different sibling sets, where there wasn't a parent or guardian that was able to care for them, or, adoption is really kind of always born out of tragedy. And so
Mhm.
there are, terrible stories that I believe are my children's stories to tell, but for whatever reason, there were times where there wasn't a caregiver present. And so I would foster these kids for longer term and eventually did end up adopting 13. They were all girls. That was not intentional. That was just kind of the way that God had it, was they were sets of sisters. So they came in threes and twos, but yeah, and the adoption process in Uganda is super long and not super straightforward. So it started with kind of long-term foster care, and then there were all these different kind of legal requirements that you had to fulfill. And so it is much easier to adopt if you're living in country. There's actually a
Mhm.
requirement that you have to live in country for a certain amount of time. But that's how, I mean, again, God just kind of beyond my wildest dreams began to build my family in this really unconventional way.
How old were you when you adopted your first daughter?
I was 22 when I started the fostership process. I
Yeah.
ended up fostering some of my kids for like 5, 6, 7 years.
Okay.
So we actually finalized their adoptions when I was quite a bit older.
Yeah. So I've had this thought when I was kind of reading through. Like I said, I kept up with your story for a long time, but when I was sitting down and writing all this down, I was like, that is such an unexpected path to motherhood, right? Like, I don't think any of us could, at even at 18, if motherhood is on your radar, think that that's going to be the way that it goes. What was the shift for you from, I'm here, I want to help, I'm invested, to like, this is the rest of my life. Like, I want these children to be mine. Does that make sense? Like, I'm stepping into this forever now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just kind of happened gradually. It wasn't
Yeah.
even like I do not feel like when I started fostering, I had it I totally
No.
had decided like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be like a mom now. Like at first it was just kind of, I'm gonna be a temporary mom. And then with the first few of our kids that didn't have kind of another situation that we could figure out for them to go back to, it was like, oh. Okay, well, I mean, I suppose like I'm here, I'm living here, I'm doing the thing, we're already living together. Like maybe this is how God is making me a mom. And I mean, I had always wanted to be a mom since I was
Hmm.
very, very young. And it's interesting, I had always had adoption on my heart and a desire to adopt, even though that wasn't a huge part of my upbringing. We didn't know very many people with adopted children. It wasn't something that I saw a lot, but I felt
Yeah.
like from a very young age, it was something that I desired. So, I mean, I don't think anybody around me was like totally shocked. But it just kind of was more than it was a like decision of like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this. And this is the same. I mean, this is the same with motherhood and with the ministry of Amazima. It kind of felt like more than it was like a, okay, this is my plan. It was like I just kept kind of saying yes to the next
Yeah.
thing God put in front of me and taking like one baby step or one day at a time. And then it was like, oh, okay, I
Here we
think
are.
like here we are, full speed
Yeah.
ahead. I think this is what is happening.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of life though. I think
Yeah.
we think, I don't know why, we think that it's all gonna lay out, but I look at even my life and how I've gotten to where I am, and it doesn't feel, it definitely was not some like grand laid out diagrammed plan. It's
Yeah.
so often just saying yes and taking that next right step. And I think those steps a lot of the time don't, I don't know, you probably felt the same way. Like they don't even feel like steps, they feel like jumps a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like they're it's just leap of faith after leap of faith, and that like God is the trapeze that's taking you from one jump
Mm,
to the other, and that I just think I've just always been convicted that I knew I didn't want to stay stagnant. And so
yeah.
leaps of faith was just kind of the natural order of things.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's like sometimes you get into a situation where you're like, okay, I guess faith is my only option here.
Yeah. If you're doing your best to eat healthy, you're reading labels, skipping the junk, then you're probably already ahead of the game. But the thing is, even clean or organic foods can hide things like seed oils and trace toxins, and it's not going to be on the label a lot of the time. That is where the Olive app comes in. Olive is a 100% independent food scanner app. It's not opinions or brand deals, it's based on lab tests, so you can actually trust what it's telling you. And it's super simple to use. You just scan a product and Olive breaks it all down for you. It tells you the ingredients, the concerns, and then it scores the food out of 100. And then if something does score poorly, Olive will even suggest a healthier alternative that'll fit your diet. What sets Olive apart is how far they go. They don't just read labels, they actually lab test the foods themselves. They recently tested nearly 300 baby food products and found several with elevated levels of lead and arsenic, and that's all in the app. So you can download the Olive Food Scanner app on the App Store today, start getting rid of all the harmful ingredients from your family's diet, and it's honestly pretty fun to like scan and see what's sneaking in your pantry. So you're living this really radically different life than I'm sure a lot of people back home were expecting for you. And like not in a negative way, it's just very different. Did you kind of just have across the board support? Everybody was all in, or did you have people that were kind of, "Oh, Katie, what are we doing? How is this going to work out?"
I didn't have a lot of people voice that response, but like I'm 100% sure that that was at least an internal response people were having because I'll be honest, like I would have that response if
Mhm.
somebody I knew or one of my kids who's like 18, 19, 20 years old in their early 20s was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I think people who knew me in childhood and my family kind of saw it coming. I don't think
Mhm.
it's not kind of what they had planned for my life or even what I had planned for my life. I mean, I was on this very kind of typical American dream path
Yeah.
where you graduate high school and then you go to college and you graduate college and you get a job and you get married. And I mean, That's what I thought my life would look like. That's what my parents and my peers thought my life would look like. So there was definitely surprise and there was
Hmm.
definitely like a, are you sure? Are you sure? But I mean, I think in a lot of ways too, there were a lot of people that were just kind of in awe as I would tell stories. And I mean, I say that not out of a place of
No,
pride, but
yeah.
just like I think we are all hungry to see God move
Yeah.
and to see God do something. And I think sometimes, even in my own life, looking at someone else's radical obedience has been a catalyst for me to want to live differently and a catalyst for me to want to radically obey in my own way. And so
Yeah.
I feel like it was. I feel like it was inspiring to a lot of people to go like, oh,
Absolutely.
if God can do that in her life, what can God do in my life? And even now, I mean, I'll be honest, I think about it now and I'm like, oh gosh, I would never do at 37 what like 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old Katie did because I think it reminds me of like what Jesus says about having faith like a child.
Yes.
Like I think just like I was so young, I was so naive to like suffering and hardship in the world. I wasn't married. I didn't have children. Like there wasn't a lot hindering me from stepping into kind of radical and unusual things. I feel
Yeah.
like now as I inch toward my 40s, I'm like making all the excuses for why, like,
Mm,
well, what if this happens or what if that happens? Or, I almost like get so logical about things that I can convince myself, like if it doesn't make sense on paper maybe you shouldn't do it, but that's not how the kingdom of God works. The
exactly.
kingdom of God doesn't make sense on paper, right?
Never.
So,
Right.
it's encouraging to me to think of faith like a child and
Yeah.
just like, oh, I hadn't lived long enough that I had a lot of reasons to be scared
Yeah.
or convince myself not to do it. And I mean, I think it's true of me that like when I see other people radically stepping into God's calling in their life. I want more of that
Yeah.
in my life. And
Yeah.
now I'm older and I have a full-time job and I have a family and we live in Nashville, not rural Uganda. And so my life looks a lot different, but still like there's still an opportunity for radical obedience. It doesn't look as big or as grand or as flashy as it did in my early years of life, but like even things like slowing my pace so that I have
Mm,
time to be kind to the people at the
come on.
grocery store. I mean, there are little everyday decisions that we can make that look different than the world around us and that
Yeah.
cause other people to go, huh, I wonder what about that person is causing her to move through life in this way. And so I think yeah, I think when it comes to different people's responses, there was a lot of support, which I'm so grateful for. There was definitely a lot of surprise, but I also think there was just kind of this thought of like, huh, well maybe I could obey God in a
Mm.
really different but similarly radical way.
Yeah, because I was thinking that as you were talking, that radical obedience does not, and you said this so clearly, it does not have to look like picking up your life and moving to Uganda. And did you grow up like in the church, like in a
Yeah.
Christian home? Yeah. So I did as well. And we also, I think we're really close to the same age. Grew up in a time where like missions is still so important, but there was like this huge push for it when we were younger. And I can remember feeling like that was the only call,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that was the
Mm-hmm.
only important thing. That was the only way that your life was truly surrendered and submitted to God. And that's why, like I mentioned, I went on that 2 week, mission. And I remember being so clearly convicted, like, this is not your path. This is not your strength. This is not your gift. And I think it was actually genuinely like similar timing to Kisses from Katie coming out and following your blog. And I remember having this thought that like there are people that are goers and there are people that are senders, and there have to be
Mm,
both, right? Like
that's
if we
good. Yeah.
all leave our homes and go out into, the rest of the world, who's sending those people? Who's
Right.
supporting them? Who, like, financially and through prayer and through, exposure? And also that there's good ground here. Like, there's good
Yeah.
ground under your feet. And I can remember, I think when you're young, it's easy to have a very like either or mentality, a very black and white. Like you're a missionary or you're wasting your time. I can remember like actually feeling that way. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I think a lot of people that grew up in that like evangelical movement felt that way. And I remember being like, no, I know that my gift is encouragement and
Mm,
communication. And
that's so good.
so I had a blog at the time as well. And what I did was I would feature like someone on
Oh, yeah.
mission once a month and like help them raise funds and stuff like that, and being like, that this is my path. Like this is how I'm gifted. And that translates beyond just the missionary non, traveling missionary conversation, that your path to motherhood looked different than mine did, but God called us both to like
Mm,
nurture and care and protect in different ways and to use our voices in different ways. And so that comparison trap is so
yes.
deadly. It's
Yes.
so deadly to, again, to like your gifts and to what, the good works that God has set before you to
Hmm.
accomplish, that I think it's so, I love that you were like, this was my path. This is where God took me. But you needed the people back home to be able to send the $100 to get everything
Absolutely.
started. You know what I mean?
Yes, for sure. And I love what you're saying about I do think around the time that I was kind of graduating high school and in early adulthood, there was this huge push for evangelical missions. And I mean, I was right along in there. My book published right alongside like Radical and Crazy Love.
Yes.
And like, oh,
Yes.
I loved both of those
Oh,
books.
I'm like, great. All three great
So good.
stout
So
books.
good. But I think a pastor gave me language for this years later, but he just said, you wrote your story to be descriptive, not prescriptive. And so, just like my heart in writing it was like, here is what God is doing in my life. And I want you to know because I want you to know who God is. And I
Exactly.
want you to see what he can do, not because there's any part of me that thinks we all have to move overseas and do something like this. If we all move overseas, then who's here? And
Hmm.
like you're saying, who is sending and supporting? I mean, I never could have done what I was doing without a ton of support from people back in the United States. And even now, like we have a stateside office and people with skill sets that I do not have and that I do not want to have that keep everything going, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think it's super important that we don't get caught in the trap of comparison and like, it breaks something in my heart when people say like, oh, I could never do what you did, or oh, that was so amazing, or this or that, because I do think like we are all called on a different path. And so
Yeah.
I feel sad when people read Kisses from Katie. I mean, still, this is like, oh my gosh, what are we like 15 years post
Yeah.
book?
Yeah.
Um, when they're like, okay, I want to move to Uganda and start a ministry and adopt a bunch of kids. And I'm like, okay, God could be calling
Yes.
to that. Absolutely possible. But what's so much more encouraging to me is when people share stories of something completely different that I never would have thought of, that they're like, hey, pieces of your story have
Yes.
actually inspired me to follow God's call on my life, which looks totally different. And I
Yeah.
think, like, oh man, there's so much beauty in being able to celebrate the unique stories that God gives people and the unique gifts and talents that he blesses them with in order to carry out his plan for
Exactly.
their life instead of trying to follow some kind of blueprint for what God has done in somebody else's life.
Right. It's what you said, the prescriptive and descriptive. That's such a
Yeah.
good way to put it, because you thankfully took a very descriptive route, but there were people out there that were like, this is the only like this is the only way to do
Sure.
it, and I think with the best intentions. I'm not trying to say that negatively. I think like when you have a passion and a
Yeah.
dedication to something, like you think everybody should like get on board and do it, but just that, yeah, like it's the story, it's the body, right? It's the description of the body, and that we can't all be a hand, right? Like we can all be the
Right.
hands and feet of
Yes.
Jesus, but not the same way. It's not going to look
Right.
the same for all of us. And so I want to talk a little bit more about you becoming a mom and what that looked like, because you adopted, it was 13, correct?
Yeah.
13 daughters, and now you also have two biological children, correct?
Yeah. We have 13 daughters and two sons.
And two sons. What, like, so, and then where in that did you meet your husband? Did you have all 13? You had all 13 on
Yeah.
your
I
own,
had I
right?
had all our I had all my girls before I met my husband.
Okay. How, like, we got to talk about that. How did you meet
Okay.
your husband? How do you like fall in love and
So
say, by the way, I have 13 kids?
well, he knew, so that
Okay.
was good. So my husband moved to Uganda to do different mission work. Um, After I had been there probably 3 or 4 years. And so we just kind of were living in the same community, bumping up against
Yeah.
each other, ended up worshiping at the same church. There was also a small Bible study that met in my home that he started coming to. And so we were friends for several years.
Yeah.
And so he spent a lot of time with our family and around my girls. And yeah, after many years of friendship, we decided like, hey, maybe we should try to be like a little bit more intentional and see where it leads. And so, super thankful for that. We've been married almost 11 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it is just wild that God would bring my husband all the way to the other side of the world. I mean, that is what I feel like that doesn't get enough fanfare in my
For
life
real.
story, but I'm like, no, for real. That is one of the most miraculous things that God has done in my life is to bring. So Benji, my husband, actually grew up like 30 minutes from where I grew up.
Stop.
Never knew each other. We're from the same area. Um, we had never met. And God, had us all the way over on the other side of the world in like a small community. Like,
Right.
what are the chances? And then on top of that, that he was willing to like look at my life and go like, no, I'm in. Like, I'm in not just to marry you, but also to adopt these children with you, which is crazy. So super thankful.
So there is a lot of talk about cooking with beef tallow these days, which I am so here for. We are ditching the seed oils. Fun fact, seed oils right now make up about 20% of the average American's daily calories. We have all these studies linking seed oils to metabolic health issues and inflammation. NASA decided to do something about it. They created the tastiest, most delicious tortilla chip with just 3 ingredients and no seed oils. These chips don't only avoid the bad stuff, they taste incredible too. It's a crunchier, tastier, sturdier chip, and the beef tallow that they are cooked in makes them more hearty. So you're not gonna like binge the bag and feel hungry after. The churro, my personal favorite. Masa Chips is beloved by 10,000s of customers. They've been endorsed by industry-leading health and nutrition experts. So if you're ready to give masa a try, go to masachips.com/Blake and use the code Blake for 25% off your first order. That's masachips.com/Blake and use the code Blake for 25% off your first order. Gosh, I didn't even really think about it that way, that God so intentionally had you where you were, and also knew that like his perfect design for marriage. And he was like, all right, I'll bring him to you. Like, I'll ship him over
Yeah.
and then have him be full. Like, obviously, he had the same heart. He was already there, running
Yes.
on
Yeah.
mission. And that makes it a little bit easier. One of my favorite descriptions when I was young and dating, and like how do you do all the things that you feel like God's asking you to do and find somebody? And I had a really incredible
Mm,
mentor, and she said, you run your race. And when you
yeah,
feel like the time is right, you look side to side and you see who's running next to you. And
absolutely.
and God will bring those people. And I mean, he did that in my life for sure, that I for me, I wasn't really marriage wasn't really on my radar. And then this boy we weren't running side by side. He cut in front of my race and was like, hey, we should go on a date. And I was like, okay. And now, we've been together for 14 years. But I think that like that is I agree. It doesn't get enough fanfare. I think that's one of my favorite parts of this is that like God
Yes,
shipped
it's
you
one of
your
my favorite
husband.
parts for sure. And similarly, like marriage wasn't super on my radar. I mean, it was something that I thought like, oh man, that would be nice. But I
Yeah.
also knew like I was making really bold life choices and really
Right.
unusual life choices. And so I had kind of surrendered to like, okay, like marriage might not be in the cards for me. But I felt really confident in where God had me. And kind of going back to the comparison piece, but it ties in here too. There's this quote from an author, Zach Eswine, that I love, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's something along the lines of like, God will give you a place to inhabit, which means you get to be present and attentive to that which is there where you are. And
Mm,
God will give you some people in that place that you can intentionally love. And so just the idea of like, we can first and foremost, like we can radically love and obey and share the love with Jesus wherever our feet are. And I found myself in sub-Saharan Africa, and that's where my feet were, and that's where I was called to love and serve my neighbor. But that's the same now that I'm here in Nashville or
yeah.
wherever we are in the world. And also that like God will intersect the people that are meant to be in our lives with us in that space. And so I certainly was not. Yes, I mean, I certainly was not looking for a husband, but the fact that there was somebody who had a similar heart and similar passions and was, running the race probably pretty far ahead of me, but was running a similar race and to go like, oh, what a beautiful thing that God would then intersect our paths. And I mean, obviously, I'm so grateful and can't imagine life without him. But I think that's such a good encouragement for single people as well. Like
Yeah.
I have so many single friends who like really are longing to get married and wanting that. And I think to just like continue to follow God and be present with him day
Yeah.
by day. And to know that like you don't have lack in the way that God designed you, in the way that He has orchestrated your life. And so to be able to look side to side and see someone who might add something instead of
Yeah.
trying to like fill a void, like we have to go to God first to
Mm,
He's the only one that's ever going to fill any void. And then we can be, then we can be living from this place of fulfillment in Him.
yeah. That's so good. You just preached, I think you just preached a whole entire sermon in just a couple minutes because it's true. I think that when my husband and I got married, there was a quote, and I cannot tell you who it was from, but it was like I married my husband because we make hell nervous. It was like
Hmm.
that was my drive, was like we are actually better together, not only
Yes.
as individuals, but for the kingdom. That like I can make more of an impact in my gifts and my capacity with this man by my side. And let me tell you, I know you feel the same way. Like that has proven so true. Like
Yes.
I could not do any of the things that I do today without that man by my side. And
Same.
he doesn't get nearly enough credit. I try to brag on him as much as I can, but I think that that is in part because of exactly what you're saying, that like both of us, our feet were where they were and we were walking
Hmm.
in our gifting. And look, and I often feel relatively ill-equipped to speak into like anything about singleness because I got married when I was 22. So I was not single for very long. But my husband was older. My husband was 30 when we got married. And he says all the time that he's so he was single for 8 years before we got
Wow.
together. And he always talks about how thankful he is because he knows that God used those years to make him the
Hmm.
man. Like, I mean, it's when he says it, he's like, God was making me a man that you would fall in love with, right? That like, that you would even, look at twice or whatever, because he's a sweetie head and always, kind of, you're like, no, I feel the same way. I'm like,
Yeah.
when we got together, I was a baby, first of all. He was a full grown adult man
Right.
with a mortgage and a job. And like, I had no idea what I was doing. And I remember thinking he was so cute and like so great, but more like big brother energy. I was like, why would he ever look at me? And then I was very wrong and I'm very thankful for that. But it was because neither of us were like looking for it. I think he had kind of,
Sure.
if he's honest, kind of like given up looking for it. Like he was really just doing his thing and allowing God to grow him. And so I love that that's a part of y'all's story as well. And again, I know I've said it 3 times, but I'm like, God shipped you a husband. Like it just doesn't get any better
Amazing.
than
Thank
that.
you, Lord.
Thank you,
Thank
Jesus.
you, Lord.
And so y'all, how did y'all get married in Uganda?
Yeah, we did.
You did. You had like a Ugandan wedding.
We
I
did.
love that with all your kids. And then I want to talk a little bit about the decision to come back. That's a huge, I mean, it was just 4 years ago. That's a huge change to have spent, I mean, your entire adult life
Yeah.
was in Africa. Like, where did that decision come from?
Well, again, like it wasn't a decision we were planning to
Yeah.
make. It wasn't something that we had spent much time like thinking about at all. But it felt like it just kind of was like we both knew that it was the right thing. So we had actually, our seven oldest kids had already moved to the United States to go to college. And so they were all in university in this area. And then there had just been a lot of different stuff. One of our kids had a health diagnosis that she needed to be close to healthcare here in the United States that we couldn't access in Uganda. And then there was the pandemic, so
Hmm.
travel. We had
Yeah.
started going back and forth a lot. I mean, we lived in Uganda in our home, but we were coming to the States once or twice a year just to check in on, like half of our
Yeah.
family was here now and to do medical appointments and stuff. And then COVID had made the traveling back and forth start to feel really tricky. And so we were actually here on what was supposed to be a 3-week trip. And a bunch of different things happened where Benji and I kind of looked at each other and we were like, we're going to stay here, aren't we? So
Yeah.
it was devastating. It
Was
was
it?
really,
Yeah.
and we weren't sure. I mean, at the time, again, like, I'm not even sure. I don't think we even thought we were moving here. We
Hmm.
definitely had said, like, let's do 6 months. And then 6 months came and went, and our kids had kind of plugged into schools. And so we were like, okay, we'll wait till the end of the school year. And then, we were still going to Uganda every few months, and we actually were watching the church that Benji had was kind of in leadership of. We had seen a lot of younger men in the church kind of step up into leadership roles in our absence. Similarly with Amazima, I had stepped out of my role as country director of Amazima several years before and was kind of training other people up to run the ministry so that I could just be support. And so as we went back and forth, we actually saw other people kind of
Yeah.
taking up these leadership roles in our absence, which, like, on the one hand, is the total dream. And
Hmm.
on the other hand, is like, oh, you don't need my help? Anything? Is there anything I can do to help you?
Yeah.
So it was, yeah, it was both, and it was really beautiful and amazing and felt like confirmation from
Hmm.
God to be in the United States for a season. And it was also really hard and really sad. And I mean, for me personally, Benji spent more, he's a little bit older than me and didn't move to Uganda as early as me. So he had done being an adult, at least for some amount of years in the United States. But like
Yeah.
I had not ever.
No.
From my
And that's a
parents'
massive
house, like my
change.
bedroom in my parents' house to Uganda. And so I didn't know, I mean, I didn't know how to do stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know any like regular adult stuff that you do. I didn't know how to do it. And then on top of that, like my children had visited the United States, but the ones that were still living at home had never lived here. So to try to learn how to live here myself as an adult
Oh my
and
gosh.
shepherd my family through that transition. It felt wildly harder than moving to Uganda when I was 18. And the
Yeah.
culture shock felt so much greater because I felt, I was responsible. I had a family.
Hmm.
Um, and we had a rhythm of life that we had settled into as a family in Uganda. And so it was a really stretching year, the
Yeah.
first year, and probably even well into the second year. We're almost at the 4-year mark, and I do finally feel really settled in, and am able to believe some of what I'm saying here today, just, believing really and truly, like, okay, God has a place for us,
Hmm.
and wherever He places us, like, that is where we can be on mission for Him. And I feel
Yeah.
grateful. I feel like I carry a lot of things that Ugandan culture taught me and formed in me and shaped me into my life here. And so I feel really grateful for that. And I think, just as much as in Uganda, there were things that were really hard. Also in America, to live as a believer in Jesus and on mission for him feels like an upstream swim
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, I do think in a lot of ways Uganda equipped me for what life here is like. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I never in a million years ever thought that I would be back living in the United
No.
States. I mean, I don't think Benji did either. We just thought like, okay, this is where we are and we will live here for the rest of our lives. And it's just so comforting to me to know that like, though that was not in my plans and that was not something that I saw coming, like it was not surprising to God. Like,
Yes.
whoa, like
Yes.
God knew about this season of my life that I literally sometimes still look around and I'm like, is this where we live? Like, what are we doing? And God knew about that and
Yeah.
he like prepared us for it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just an encouragement too to anybody listening who is feeling like, what is going on?
Mhm.
This is not where I thought I would be. This is not what I expected life to look like. Um, it has been such a comfort to me to know that even when I am shocked, God
Mhm.
is not shocked. And even when I mean, 4 years in, I can kind of look back and see it and say this with confidence, but there were days where I could not look back and see what God was doing at
Yeah.
all. Um, but just to know that he really was working something in me and he really was preparing me for, more ministry that he had for us.
Yeah. Well, and I think so. I'm actually in a bit of a transition season. I'm not moving from Africa, obviously, and I know that we don't have to compare or qualify, but that you use the word stretching, and I think that like
Mm,
seasons changing always comes with like just being stretched
yeah.
beyond your capacity. And what I've found is that I'm learning, this is like the scariest sentence to say, but like I want to be stretched beyond my capacity because
Mhm.
that's how your capacity grows. Like
Absolutely.
I love that
Yes.
Chuck Swindoll quote, which I think I've quoted it in like 3 podcast episodes lately. But it's like when I asked people when they grew in their faith, they never mentioned an easy time ever. Right?
It's
Like
so
it's
true.
so
That's so
true.
true.
It's never easy. But what's crazy is to think that, like, as an, on the American side of things, I think people would think, oh, you're you're coming home, you're coming back to all the
Mhm.
comforts and the American lifestyle. But that in reality, that was probably devastating and so hard. And so, from the outside looking in, sometimes the seasons that God's calling you into look like they look packaged up like this should be great, this should be really easy, like this should be,
Right.
or even like there are some situations where it's like a little bit of what you prayed for, but then you
Yeah.
get to the doorstep of it and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, for sure. People, not a lot of people, but there were a couple people who would say like, "Oh, are you glad to be home?" And I was like,
No,
"What? What are
this
you
isn't
talking about?
home.
What are you talking about?"
Yeah,
No. Yeah.
yeah, because this wasn't home, like you said. I mean, 18, that's
Yeah,
just
no, it definitely did not feel like home.
yeah,
Especially it's not home that I had lived in the
right,
context of one being just a grown up period, but like
yeah,
being a mom and a wife, like I was a completely different person. And so it kind of it feels like home now, but it took a
yes,
long time to settle
yes.
into that.
Well, and I think it goes back to what we kind of were talking about in the beginning. You were talking about how it was almost easy to make those jumps when you were younger because you had that
Hmm.
childlike faith. But then you get older. I was thinking about this when you were talking about it. I think part of what makes it hard is that you have more things to love, you have more things
Yeah,
at stake and at risk. And you know too much now, like you know how
right.
things can go sideways or go badly or whatever, and then that's where our tendency to like white knuckle everything
Absolutely.
comes from. And it's not inherently bad or even like sinful. I think a lot of people struggle with faith and with anxieties because they care so much. We have this
Mm,
abundance of like,
yes,
I'm invested and I love this and I care. And it's God going, yes, I care more.
right.
I know more. I am in control more. Like, do do you see that? And I'm telling you, like I'm in process on that very much so. I have an episode that came out a couple weeks ago about pruning. Like God's been pruning
Oh,
so much out of my life lately. And it's things that I'm like, wait, like that was good. Like I thought you gave me that. What? Why are you? And God's going, no, I did, but
yeah.
it's not for you to hold in this season. And that I've had this image in my mind of like I've white knuckled so much out of caring, out of love, out of wanting to be obedient and like be a good daughter. I've white knuckled all these things, and it's like almost like I have arthritis. Like I'm trying to learn how to like
Mm,
stretch my hands open and hold
yeah.
them more open-handedly. But when I look at your story, like that's why you were able to make, I think, a lot of these jumps is that you've had this open-handed approach to your life.
Yeah, that's such a good picture about the white knuckling and the arthritis. I'm a sucker for like a
I
good
am too,
metaphor
girl.
or
I
like a
am
good
too.
picture that stays in your mind. I actually wrote a book in our first year and a half in the United States called Safe All Along. I started writing it when I didn't know we were going to live in the United States,
Yeah.
but funny enough, the theme of the book was going to be like how to live in God's peace and how to
Mm,
embody the peace that, Christ says, I leave you peace, my peace I leave you. How do we actually live out of that place of peace in a world that is just so chaotic? So funny, I proposed that I would write that book, and then like 3 months later, we moved here, and I was like,
ah,
I don't know
I'm
how
not
to
safe. Do I feel safe? I don't feel
do this. Never mind.
safe.
But the word picture that idea of a book was born out of was my one of my adult daughters and I had jumped in the river at a place where we usually would like play and kayak and paddleboard and just, I mean, it was a safe place to swim, but just in this like fluke thing, we got caught in a current and
Mm,
ended up getting carried downriver farther than we wanted to go. I mean, we were like stuck in this current and it was moving really, really fast. And long story short, I was able to pull myself out of the water, but I couldn't reach her. And so I watched her go around the corner and couldn't see her anymore and just sat on this rock and was like full on panic mode,
yeah.
mother's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
So obviously she ended up getting out and was totally fine and was good and like thought it was hilarious, which I did not. She's like, you want to go again? I'm like, no.
No.
But later that day, so I'm like sobbing hysterically to Benji and like, oh, I thought she was gone. I thought we lost her. Later that day, he took me like high up on the riverbank. And from up higher, you could see a lot bigger piece of the river. And you could see just all the different places where she would have been able to get out, right? There was like a little island that she
Mm,
could have swam to, and there was a little cove, and there was a place where the water was still. And there were some fishermen who actually had helped her get out. And so I remember just so clearly, the words kind of just dropped into my mind like, oh, I was safe all along. And I
God's good.
just had this deep realization that, like, so often we are living our lives like eye level with the
Yep.
water, right? And the
Yep.
currents are all around us, and we're panicking. We're like, I don't know what to do in this unexpected season that you have me in, God. And this isn't what I thought. And like, oh, like you're saying, I thought you gave me that. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why are you taking it away now? And so we can just live in this anxiety that comes often, like you're saying, from caring about things really deeply. But God's vantage point is
Yeah.
so much more like what it looked like on the riverbank, where
Yeah.
he sees all the twists and turns. He sees the places where he's going to give us reprieve. He sees the way he's going to use the really hard things from previous seasons. And so just, really the last couple years of my life trying to really lean into that metaphor and trust like, okay, God, my vantage point is here. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot see what you're doing. I do
Mm-hmm.
not understand, but I know that you can see the whole picture and that you have a good plan.
Oh, that is so good. I actually was talking in my stories yesterday about I'm in a little bit of a hard season, right? Like the stretching and the pruning and
Mm,
unlearning and learning. But what I was talking about was this is one of the first, it's not the first hard season I've ever walked through, but it is the first one I think where I don't have amnesia, where I'm able to
oh,
look
that's good.
back and see, like, I
Yes.
have walked through hard things before and God stayed exactly who he was. And not
Yes.
only that, like what he did in me and what he did in my life and how he kept his promises. And so I texted my friend this morning, everything sucks. I'm not going to lie. Everything is hard,
Yeah.
but God, like, but I'm
Mm,
okay. And yeah, like there are moments where I feel hollowed out and like I've got nothing to give anybody. And that's okay. Cause I think God even uses those feelings and moments to show us, yeah, that's where your cup overflows, right? Like that's where I anoint your head with oil and like it's not up to you, but just that faith muscle is in your brain and it is growing and stretching and just remembering. It is remembering. And I think like just journals are so helpful for that. I don't know
yeah.
about you, but like
Yes.
when this season hit and I was looking around going, oi, like what is going on? I pulled out an old journal and
Mm,
flipped back to like when things felt hard and was able to like just those glimmers, right? I love that term of like glimmers rather than, like there's triggers and there's glimmers. And glimmers are those little things that just shine and pull you in and remind you of like what God has done and who he is and what he's doing. And it reminds me of that river metaphor that like you've you've been a lot of the time like you've been riding in this river the whole time and like
right.
he's protected you and he's given you reprieve and he's given you places to get off and rest. It's up to us to just remember rather
Right.
than because the water is up here panic and forget and think it all counts on you and that like you're the one that's in control. So I'm with you.
Totally.
I love a word picture. I love a word picture so much. That's so good.
And isn't it, I mean, even just hearing you talk, like, isn't it so beautiful that, like, the longer we walk with God, just kind of the more we have stored up, like you're saying,
Yes.
first time that I didn't have amnesia, like, it feels like, yeah, just a muscle that's growing,
Yes.
right? The more and more we walk through him with him through the different seasons and through the hard things, like, the more and more we know how to do it. And that doesn't make the
Exactly.
hard seasons not hard, and
No.
that doesn't make your day not suck.
No.
But you know what to do. You know how to keep turning toward God. You know how to remember who he is. And I just think yeah, that makes me excited kind of about like even just getting older. Just like, oh
Yes.
man, the more and more years I have of walking with God, like the more and more the hard stuff doesn't like shake my confidence in him.
Right. It doesn't knock you down as
Yes.
hard because hope is really
Mm,
powerful
yeah.
and it's really stabilizing, is what I found. Like hope is stabilizing.
Mm,
Everything around me may feel frenetic and out of my control, and a lot of it is, but like hope I just keeping your eyes on Jesus. You hear people say that all the time. And I think sometimes in practicality, you're like, okay, great. But everything's falling apart. I gotta like how do I abide when there's all these things to do? And I love that quote that's like, you have to sit with Mary before you can work with Martha. You have to
mm,
like keep your eyes on Jesus. And that really is as simple as like moment by moment, day by day, like welcoming him into it. Like this feels hard. Instead of trying to do it out of my own power, I'm going to welcome Jesus into it and I remember what he's done. And it's that a
yeah.
thousand times a day,
Yes.
literally. I'm sure that's what it felt like when y'all came
Literally.
back, was like, all right, Jesus, I don't know
It
what you're
still feels
doing.
like that
Right,
every day.
exactly. Every single day, every single
Yes.
day. I know. And I think that's the beautiful thing about your story and also the way that you choose to tell it is you don't have to like pick up your life and move to Uganda to feel
Hmm.
very connected to your story because we're all walking through hard things and we're all making decisions and leaps of faith and you have done that so beautifully that I think it like you were talking about earlier, like it inspires other people that like my jump may be, I don't know, making a career change or doing something different with my kids or whatever that is. And that like God is walking through it with us. And so with our last couple of minutes, I would love if you wanted to share about Amazima and like how people can connect with you and work alongside you or help or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So Amazima is online. We have a website, amazima.org. We have Amazima is on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. It's just my name, Katie Davis Majors. And so we share a lot of the same stuff. And there are a lot of different ways to plug in and get connected, give. We even have occasionally, we only have a handful of American staff out of like the 300 staff that we have, but we do occasionally have positions for teachers or mentors to come over. And so you can just check us out online.
Yeah, awesome. Katie, thank you so much for your time, for your heart, for your wisdom and your story.
Oh,
I loved getting to sit down and chat with you. Like literally, 12, 15 year ago, Blake would be dying that we got to sit down and talk because I remember
oh,
reading your blog and reading your book. So this was so great. And you are as lovely and delightful as you seem online, which that's the best when people are exactly who they seem to be.
yeah, I hope so. Well, this has been super fun for me too. So thanks for having me.